Matt, very good to see you. We come to everybody today with an important question and statement. You need to stop using the S&P as a benchmark. But when we hear headlines about the markets, Matt, it's often about how the S&P 500 is performing. And clients often come to you with the same question. What is it?
Aaron, the question, we call it frame of reference risk. And by the way, I think this is one of the most important videos we've ever done to help people understand the markets and their accounts and what's going on. So frame of reference risk. Years ago, I was following a stock that Kiplinger said was the best stock. They were the best stock pickers that you've never heard of. And you didn't hear of them because they weren't to the retail investors. They weren't advertising. They weren't all over social media. They only advertised to guys like us. And I followed the fund. We got into it. It was really good. And I put some clients in it. And I noticed there was no correlation to the S&P. So when the S&P was up, it was up a little bit. S&P was, moderate. It stayed the same. And then one year, the S&P just tanked and this stock took off through the roof. And it was just, it was a great fun. But people, their frame of reference is what they hear in the news and what they see with the S&P. And my point is there's a lot of good funds out there that aren't correlated to the S&P 500. I had one client call me up that came with me in 21. 21 was a fine year. The 22 was a down year, right? And then they hear the S&P is up 10%, 15%, and they look at their account and, we've had 2 years and one of them was arguably the worst year since 2008. And I just had to go back and say, let's look at the S&P for that same time frame, not the 20-year average. Let's look at it for the same time frame. And they saw that we were in line with their frame of reference to S&P 500.
I see. So I guess this begs the next question. A lot of people want to know, why don't I invest in what's doing well right now?
Well, last year's winner could be this year's loser. In fact, there's a chart that we have that called the periodic table of investments. And if you look at it, look around 2000, 2007, 2008, you'll see that real estate and foreign investments were hot. Or in 2007, they were hot. And then 2008, of course, they just tanked and they went through the floor. The whole point to this chart, I know it looks confusing, but you're not going to find one winner on the top year in, year out. And that's why it's so important to have a diversified portfolio and to work with an advisor that is looking ahead and helping you win.
Mm-hmm. Right. Every color here represents a different sector. And as you can see, it looks like a game board. Those colors are spread out everywhere. That makes sense.
That it does.
What is the difference between average rate of return and dollar rate of return?
Good question. So you can have two average rates of return that are the same number. For example, on this chart, we see one investment that goes up 100%. It's an aggressive fund. And then it goes down 50%, up 100, down 50 over a 7-year period. And then when you look at the balance at the end of that 7 years, it's still zero. So the average rate of return was 50, but your actual dollar rate of return was 0. Mm-hmm. Whereas the other investment went up 65, down 15, up 65, down 15. It's still a 50% average rate of return, but over a 7-year period, you almost tripled your money. So back in the broker-dealer world where I came from, we were all taught average rate of return, average rate of return, average rate of return. But you can have an average rate of return of 0 and still have a negative balance. It's as simple as this. If I have 100 grand and lose 50%, I have 50 grand. Well, if I make 50% next year, I'm at 0 rate of return, but I have 75 grand. I still lost money. And that works both ways, by the way.
Good point. So when we see the markets are going up, even though we all want to see huge gains, those gains might not be in line with our risk tolerance.
Perfect point, Aaron. Perfect point. Right on. So I was talking to someone the other day. They were all S&P, S&P, S&P. Let's do the S&P. Well, when you're 70 years old, you probably don't want all your money in the S&P. Your risk tolerance is a little bit lower. So we do a risk profile, and let's say a high score is 80. That means you're aggressive. And then a middle score would be 40, and you're moderate. But as we age, it's a general phenomenon that people get more conservative, right? We don't want to be, when you're 70, you're not concerned about the return on your money. You're concerned about the return of your money. You want to get your money back. A little return is good. That's your risk tolerance. And that means if we're moderate, the S&P did 20, we're going to do 10. If you're really conservative, then you're going to tone that down some more. You want to make sure you're invested with your risk tolerance and keep that in mind when you're listening to the news and what you're hearing every day.
Mm-hmm. So again, a common question, I'm a smart guy, Matt. Why am I making irrational financial decisions?
Well, we only work with smart clients. All of our clients are, we love them all. The point is, we all get wrapped up into the euphoria. When
Yeah.
the market's going, we're hearing it every day. Get into this. Years ago, people called Bitcoin, different terms that were not favorable, and now people are kind of jumping on that rail, right? And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but point being is, over time, if we keep hearing the same story over and over again, we're all going to get suckered a little bit, and we're going to ride the wave. Instead of riding the wave and getting in on the top end, you want to sell to the sound of trumpets and buy to the sound of war, the old saying goes. In other words, when everyone's happy, we're going to be millionaires, you might want to get a little more conservative. And when everyone's saying, man, doom and gloom, man, life is so hard, it's horrible, you might want to look for opportunities to buy.
Mhm.
A good way to do it is make sure that while you're working, you're dollar cost averaging through every cycle, and you're playing the long game. We're not riding, we're not picking that in the Callahan periodic table of funds. We're not picking last year's winner. A balanced portfolio that you dollar cost average in over time, you're going to get there.
Yeah. Well, this was such an important discussion to have, Matt. If somebody wants to see if they are invested in a way that is in line with their risk tolerance, or if they just want to talk this topic through because it is complicated and it's hard not to be emotional when we're investing, what's the best way to reach you?
Come on into the office, give me a call, 425-256-3105, or email me, mberkland@choosevault.com. I'd love to get together with you.
All right. Matt, thanks for your time today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Erin.